Okay, so I saw Spider-Man Far From Home, and I need to explain where I'm coming from so you can understand how I feel about this video and why I think they could have and should have introduced Uncle Ben in this franchise, at least in this movie. It would have made perfect sense to me. It would have been the perfect time to do it. And before you get your webs into twist, let me just clarify, I really enjoy the MCU Spider-Man. I think Tom Holland does a great job. He pours his heart and soul into it. I liked his environment. I like the fact that he's still in high school, because if you really do think about it, the last two iterations of the character, Amazing Spider-Man and the Sam Raimi trilogy, the character was only in high school in the Amazing Spider-Man for one movie, and then he graduated in the next one. And then in the Sam Raimi trilogy, he was literally in high school for like 30 minutes, and then he, after the whole thing with Ben happened, they pretty much jumped to graduation, and then now he's in the city, and now we're off and away from high school now. We're in the adult world, college life, right? So to me, him being in a high school setting is a much fresher and different, like, just breath of fresh air to me, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the environment. Even if I can't relate to everything that's happening, I don't have to, because it's a fictional character at the end of the day, but there are other people that can relate to them, and that's the beauty of Spider-Man. Hell, Stan Lee's cameo in Spider-Verse said it best, that the mask will always fit, at least eventually, right? So whether you relate to Miles more, whether you relate to, you know, Peter Parker or Ultimate Peter Parker, like, it doesn't matter. There's always a Spider-Man for you that you will relate to, even as if he's in his adulthood, because Spider-Man is just that dude. After watching Far From Home though, my only question was, where is Uncle Ben? Now, I know most people really are tired of seeing Uncle Ben die, and I'm one of them. However, the difference between his backstory and, let's say, Batman's, because I think the three most tired backstories and origin stories in film are Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. Peter's origin, as opposed to Batman, for example, Batman's parents, they left the theater. Sure, it was a cause of him being a kid and wanting to leave, and then, you know, go in the alleyway, bam, bam, shot. But more often than not, you don't get much story to that. And then everyone else in Bruce's life just tells Bruce, oh yeah, your parents were such a great influence to society and were such great people, Thomas Wayne, yada, yada, yada. But we don't see that. But Uncle Ben, sure, he dies early, but he has conversations with Peter, and it gives, like, obviously great power comes, you know, the rest. But it's obvious that through the relationship that he has with Peter, that Peter learns to be who he is because of his father figure, because of Uncle Ben. And when he dies, it's a direct cause of the irresponsibility of Peter. So it has a lot of weight to it. I don't think they didn't completely forget about Uncle Ben, because obviously in Far From Home, Peter has a suitcase with BFP, so it's obviously Ben Parker, right? So he has existed, and I believe they mentioned him in Civil War, not by name, but by, like, referring to a certain situation that happened when Peter's talking to Tony about something's happening when it's the cause of yourself and bad things happen, right? And it's like you get to thinking and you start to click, like, okay, that's obviously probably the Uncle Ben situation, right? But my problem doesn't lie that Tony's there, or that Tony replaces Uncle Ben. My problem is that Tony's importance overshadows Uncle Ben. Because to me, I can't see it being justified that Peter or Aunt May have no, like, type of connection to someone that have been part of their lives for so long. He has raised Peter until he was like 14, 15 years old, until his unfortunate passing, because in Civil War they mentioned that he's only been Spider-Man for 6 months at that time. So it's obviously that it happened during those 6 months or before. So it doesn't make any sense that for someone that has been a part of Peter's entire life, that he doesn't just talk about him. He doesn't mention him. They don't mention him at all. They don't even mention him by name. It feels like he doesn't exist, and that's a problem. And it feels like they're trying to have Tony be the surrogate, but like I said, he's only known Tony as a mentor figure for about a year and a half or two, because we're not going to include the snap, because obviously that's 5 years that Peter didn't even know passed until he woke up from being snapped away. So seeing all of those things, it really doesn't justify why Tony means so much more to Peter as opposed to Ben Parker. And this leads into my problem with Aunt May too, because it seems like the writers over for MCU Spidey, I believe wrote Ant-Man and the Wasp, they don't seem to grasp any other joke or any other characteristics for Aunt May other than, hey man, psst, she's hot. You get it? We're gonna write that she's hot and like young, and that's gonna be the joke for the whole MCU. And like I get it, Marissa Tomei. I know you can wank your web shooters to that all you want. She's a gorgeous woman, and I love her. But it seems the writers just can't seem to figure out a way to write her more interesting. It really just feels like everyone in Homecoming literally just fawns over her. The deli owner, oh yeah, and he speaks in Spanish to his coworker about how hot his aunt is. The dude at the Thai restaurant literally gives them a free bowl of rice because his aunt is hot. Civil War, Tony keeps reiterating the fact that his aunt is hot. And Far From Home, they don't go that far anymore, but literally that's still the running joke of like, oh well, she's a young hot Aunt May, and now she's apparently shagged up with Happy Hogan, and then that's literally it. There's nothing else she does. She gives Peter a couple pep talks about his plan with MJ in Far From Home that he mentioned right off the bat in the movie, but that's really it. And he packed his suit for him that he barely wore, and he wore it one time, and then that was it for that red and blue suit. So she really has no weight, and then Peter doesn't really like talking to her. He keeps like acting like this super embarrassed teenager with her, except the one scene at the beginning or near the beginning where they're in the charity thing for the homeless. And it's cool that Aunt May has like a job, and she's not, it doesn't seem like they're struggling for money. Like, not saying that they're rich, but it seems like she has a stable kind of good job, while also Peter having the backing of literally Stark Industries, and you could call Happy whenever. But it just doesn't feel like this Aunt May has any weight to her. Like, again, Before You Stab Me, the Sam Raimi trilogy's Aunt May really had a grandmotherly love. I know aunt doesn't mean grandmother, but she had a grandmotherly love. She had weight, and she had interesting character. She loved her son, right? And then the moment where Peter in Spider-Man 2 confesses to her that Ben died because of him, that's the love of his life, of her life. And her first initial reaction to that was like shame and like sadness. She didn't say, oh Peter, it's okay, don't worry about it. She literally took her hand away from his grasp and walked upstairs. And then obviously later she got over it because obviously she loves her, her son. And they had a talking, and then her character, like, even the moment where she gives Peter $20 for his birthday while she's struggling on her house about being foreclosed, she literally wants to help her son so much that she says, you need this more than I do. Please take it. Like, I want to help you, right? That's the type of shit like I like to see. But this Aunt May doesn't have any direction because it doesn't seem like there's like no weight from the Uncle Ben situation. This leads into like my whole like thing about this, the whole topic about this video is how they could have introduced it. And Aunt May would have been a key player for that. For the first reason, for the first way that they could have introduced Uncle Ben in this without being ham-fisted or just jam-packed or just, forced. Aunt May wants to get with Happy Hogan, right? They're not like a concrete thing, but obviously there's some sexual tension or whatever. They like each other, right? They're in love with each other or whatever. All they could have done, a perfect scene. They could have taken out some of the stupid comedy and like stuff from the Europe stuff. Some of it didn't work. A lot of it was just like, or joke. They could have taken a lot of that stuff out, or part of it at least, to take a 5-minute scene where Aunt May is talking, sits down with Peter and goes, look, I like Happy, and he, obviously it's in, like, he knows I like him, he likes me, we're hanging out, we've been seeing each other a little bit, yada yada yada. And then they could have had an emotional, powerful scene where maybe we see flashbacks of the scene of what happened with Uncle Ben, and it could have reminded Peter of him and brought the memory back. Or it could have been a more interesting thing where like Peter doesn't want to talk about it because he feels so guilt-ridden, right? And then, because obviously technically since that thing happened, it's been like 7 years, right? Since like Civil War. So that could have been an emotional, powerful scene where she was like, I want to be happy, and like they could have showed the flashback or whatever, and then Peter could have been like, I would think he wants you to be happy too, and then they can, like, no pun intended, and then they could have both gotten over it together, and then Aunt May would have been like, a more like developed character, and everyone would have been more developed after that, and then the Aunt May and Happy thing would have been more organic rather than kind of just random as like MJ's, like the love with MJ, because Peter had no interest in MJ in Homecoming, and then all of a sudden in Far From Home, he's like infatuated and in love with her. So it would have been more organic if like this scene, a simple scene, would have sufficed to just bring him back, to bring that heart into Peter's like ideology. Number two, the second way they could have done it, instead of Mysterio going and showing Peter the grave of Tony Stark in the Illusion battle, which was amazing, by the way, instead of showing him Tony Stark in that, to me, Quentin Beck obviously knows everything about Peter Parker, right? He has this crack team of writers. He has a writer. He has a story like dialogue writer. He has like special effects people. He is a special effects guy. He has tech people. He knows everything about Peter Parker. He could have easily, instead of using Tony to manipulate him, because again, Uncle Ben carries more weight to me than Tony, just because Tony was a mentor and a big character in the MCU. To me, he could have been like, okay, or he could use both of them. It doesn't matter. He could use Tony and Uncle Ben in that scene of them both coming out the grave to haunt him. But there could have just been a scene where, like, you know, Spidey talks about, you know, his uncle and like how Tony reminded him of like what the best parts of his uncle, right? That could have been something simple. And then obviously Quentin Beck would have already known this and would have used this to like preload all the data and all that stuff onto like the future illusion stuff that he's gonna do. And number three is obviously the one that's way out there and never gonna happen, because obviously he exists because of the BFP on the luggage, is that Aunt May in this film franchise is obviously young and hot, right? That's the whole joke. And her aesthetic, to me, like, a lot of her like wardrobe choices are very 70s, very free spirit. Like, she's always like smiley and like kind of giggly and like she's very free spirit, it feels like, right? So to me, what if there wasn't a Ben Parker yet, and maybe they changed some origin stuff, because it is the MCU, right? They change stuff to like, you know, fit their narrative. What if her name is May Parker or whatever, and then Ben doesn't show up into the picture until later, and because she's so young, maybe she starts to date a Ben Parker or whatever, and then we kind of see an interesting dynamic that goes throughout a couple more movies, and maybe that leads to him dying eventually, and then we have a different type of Uncle Ben, which again, this isn't going to happen because obviously there is evidence that he's existed in this universe already, at least at some point before Civil War. So it's not going to happen, but I think this would have been an interesting like narrative choice for them to go with, especially if they're going to do the whole young hot Aunt May thing. And that's the one thing they're going to run with. So for all that being said, guys, I know not everyone likes the MCU Spider-Man. I personally like him a lot. I love Sam Raimi's still going to be my top boy for now, because Spider-Man 1 and 2 are just great. But Far From Home is like my third favorite Spider-Man movie. Homecoming was good, but I like, you know, more stuff from Far From Home. Whether or not the MCU Spidey writers decide to incorporate him in a different movie or a different Spider-Man story down the line, all I know is that with great power comes great responsibility.